Again, there's a new Hitler, and he's the president of Iran, and he intends to build nuclear weapons, and his brazen declarations against the Jews in America have been carried on the front pages of America's newspapers. Ladies and gentlemen, we must demonstrate courage. We must demonstrate intellectual honesty. We must demonstrate the willingness to stand up and to speak out. We must act now to stop Iran before the maniacal dream of exterminating the Jewish people becomes a nuclear holocaust. And I am hopeful that the American government will have the courage to help Israel in its day of adversity against tyrants. I don't think there's ever a time that you can say you have enough support. I think that our objective is to always let our elected officials know that A, we do support Israel, and that if anyone comes against Israel in a malicious way, we would do everything in our power to see that that was their last term in office.
For those guys that were on the campaign with me during the 2002 election. And I want to get a copy of your tape of those commercials that they run. Give me a call. I'm in office 326-8844. Thank you. Bye. What AIPAC did, some members of the United States Congress, rather, they put in resolutions condemning Libya. And they just kept them in the resolutions with Syria and with Iran and with Iraq. They kept putting them in that in resolution and kept pushing for all kinds of sanctions, all kinds of action against them. And of course, I voted against the resolution, and others started voting against it. And I think what later I found out what really made them angry, other members of Congress came to me and wanted to know what was happening, and I was telling them, we're trying to negotiate.
So what happened?
I was looking at CNN. Several people had called me and told me what they had seen and heard, and they told me, look at CNN. And they flooded the radio and TV with commercials. Those commercials, and you have to understand the mode that the country was in. We had just gone through 9/11, and most Americans didn't know Hussein from Gaddafi or Gaddafi from bin Laden. They didn't know the difference. They all saw them as the same. And the commercial, many commercials, put me with them, saying I supported them.
Support and finance international terror network.
It had image of the airplanes flying into the World Trade Center.
Controversial position.
I tell you, I was dropping rapidly in the polls. We had continued polling. I was dropping rapidly in the polling. I tell you, it was, you have to admit it was well planned and they executed it. Afterthought, they said, my goodness, they had it together. I lost the election. But you have to understand, you're talking about a forbidden subject. No one wants to talk about Jews. It's a no-no. It's like you're talking about something that's wrong. You're not even supposed to give your opinion.
So you think it's very difficult for me to even ask questions about Israel lobby in Washington?
Absolutely. Very difficult to get answers. Very difficult to get interviews. I hope you're successful. I wish you well. It's going to be rough.
there is an enormous, very, very powerful machine out there that notes immediately when someone takes anti-Israel positions and moves out on the attack. I'll give you a very concrete example. I had mentioned the Mearsheimer-Walt study once in a seminar at one of the universities where I teach, and within 48 hours I had an email from Alan Dershowitz.
Who is he?
Alan Dershowitz is a Harvard professor who protects the Jewish lobby in America like an attack dog. I had an email from him, and the email essentially said he didn't think I was doing justice to the American-Israeli relationship, to Israel's existence in the world, etc., by citing the Walt Mearsheimer report because it was so heavily flawed, mistaken, and so forth. And he even attached his own attack on the Walt Mearsheimer report and advised me to use it as counterbalance in my seminar. Well, I wasn't even using the report in my seminar. I simply had mentioned it as evidence of some people's ire, if you will, with the lack of discussion, the lack of debate on these issues in America. And within 48 hours, I had one of the attack dogs for the Jewish lobby coming after me.
But how could he know this?
There are people all over America, on campuses all across America, who are set up to do just what he did, to protect the interest of Jewish Americans, and particularly the interest of Israel in America. In that sense, the Jewish lobby is probably more organized and more able to move swiftly against any potential threat than any other lobby.
I was invited this autumn to speak at an organization called 2020, and we agreed on my subject, U.S. foreign policy and the Middle East and the Israel lobby, because this was a big issue in the newspapers at the time. And I heard nothing until about a week before my talk. I was informed by her secretary, the president of this organization's secretary, that we would be meeting at the Polish consulate, which is the usual place apparently where they met. And then the next week, 2 hours before I was supposed to talk, I had a telephone call from the organization's leader, terribly upset, saying the Polish consul general had cancelled the talk there at the consulate because of telephone calls he had received from the American Jewish Committee and the Anti-Defamation League. Well, the consul's position I can understand is very difficult. Poland in this country, if you say to someone, Poland, the thought they have is anti-Semitism immediately. So Poland has a problem of overcoming this image here. The new Polish government, which is not a very attractive one, has nonetheless been working very hard to try to build good relations with Washington, to be friendly with Israel, to show that it's a good guy, and so on these subjects. And now suddenly someone comes along and says to the Polish Consul General in New York, you know, Tony Judt is a very controversial character, he's anti-Israel, his remarks some people think are anti-Semitic, are you sure you want to have him? Bad for your image, bad for your diplomacy. But why would the Poles stand up heroically for my right to speak? They have bigger concerns, so I don't blame them.
The lobby, what it's doing is it's going after people in a really hard-hitting way for the purposes of shutting us down, and also for the purposes of sending a message to other people that if you follow in the footsteps of Jimmy Carter, or you follow in the footsteps of Tony Judt, or you follow in the footsteps of John Mearsheimer and Steve Walt, you will pay a serious price for your transgressions. Right? So that's a deterrence model. They're trying to deter other people from doing what we did.